Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Who Moved My Career. I'm your host, Nicole McNamara, here with my guest, Steve Jaffe, the esteemed author of perhaps one of the most timely books called The Layoff Journey. This book really gets into what it's like during, after the, kind of reinvention after a layoff. And I was posting on our LinkedIn the other day and I said, man, you always want a little bit of product market fit, but this is like a lot of product market fit. So congratulations on, being first to the conversation here. I'm really excited to get into the book. So we're psyched to have you on today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And thank you for the positive, kind words. And I'm glad you enjoyed the book.
Let's talk a little bit, Steve, about why you had to write this book. Tell us a little bit about what was going on before you wrote the book and, when that moment when you said, hey, I think there's a book here.
Yeah. Yeah. So my background is in marketing and advertising, and I had about a 25, 30-year career. And over that career, I had 4 layoffs. So my first layoff came in the spring of 2001. My fourth layoff came in the summer of 2023. And what I found was that there was a very big difference between how I processed and reacted to the fourth layoff than my first layoff. And I realized I had learned a set of skills, a set of coping skills to manage the grief of a layoff in a way where I was able to move through it very quickly. I had been wanting to write a book. I had been looking for the topic of a book. And when I realized that I had some wisdom to share in a space that nobody really talks about, which is the grief after a layoff. Everybody just gets right into here's how you update your resume and here's how you do job interviews and all of this, and they don't stop and process the grief, which is really important and a difficult thing to do. So I felt like I could contribute meaningfully to a dialogue about something that wasn't happening. I had no idea that layoffs were going to be this prolific in 2025.
Mm.
And it's a little bit bittersweet, like there's an audience for my book, but in a way, like I kind of wish there wasn't an audience because it's difficult. I just read a headline today that in the month of October this year, there were more layoffs than there've been in the month of October for the past 20 years. So
Wow.
it's affecting a lot of people, and I hope that I'm able to offer some words of wisdom to folks that are going through it.
Steve, if you didn't write this book, what was the other thing you were going to write about?
I have a bunch of fiction ideas around different things, maybe within the advertising industry that you could kind of find some entertaining
You're like
topics on.
The new Mad Men.
Yeah, right. So there was a few things there, a few things also in my career loosely related to the advertising industry that I think I could have some fun with. So there may be another book in me yet. So we'll see what's ahead.
Well, when that happens, we will be sure to have you back on as part of our, how do you take the layoff and move it into reinvention piece. And Lord knows there's plenty of interesting things happening now and also historically in the ad agency world. So let's go back to the moment that it happened to you. I mean, you said something that struck me because there is this physical reaction when you get the news
Yeah.
of a layoff. And just a quick clarifying question. Were you an individual contributor who was laid off, or were you also a team leader whose team was laid off? Just sometimes there's a different dynamic there.
I've had both experiences. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have someone else on our podcast. Her name's Erica, and she also got laid off 4 times. She talks about the exact same thing, that like the first is like a freight train,
Yeah.
and the second is like a slide. Like,
Right.
yep, there we go. There we go.
Right.
She didn't use that metaphor, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what I think about. So I remember when the news became real for me that not only was I going to get laid off, but I was going to also lay off my team. There was a really weird juxtaposition of relief on some level because I couldn't hide it anymore. I couldn't deny it anymore. Like the truth was there. And simultaneously, I wanted to lie down and take a nap,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
an
Right.
odd sensation.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like you talk about the moment you learn, what did that feel like for you? And
Mhm.
maybe it's different each time, but like how do you help put some sounds and moments and feelings to that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can put myself in that moment and just remember my throat gets tight, my heart races, my
Mm.
body gets really warm. It's very strange fog kind of comes over me. Like I can hear things, but I'm not really present in a way where I'm hearing and processing. Like I'm starting to shut down. Like it's kind of a fight or flight response. And there's also fight, flight, or freeze. And I very much feel like I kind of freeze and I just like things, body starts shutting down, and you end up in a fog. And I feel like I stay in that fog for the first like day or two. And I'm really deep in the denial, which is stage one of grief, the shock, the denial, and then of course followed by anger, and I'll get pretty angry. So that's usually like the first couple of days and it's normal and it's okay to feel those things. You just certainly don't want to let like anger consume you. You find a healthy outlet for it.
Yeah, when I think about the like physical manifestation of all of those things coming together, and simultaneously, the fact that your head knows this is actually not about you. It is about a number on a spreadsheet that has perhaps financial data tied to it, tenure tied to it, like some set of data that is not actually about Steve Jaffe, but Steve Jaffe feels it really deeply in his physical self. Like, how do you reconcile that? Because when your heart and your head are doing two things that are in like drastically opposing spots, it's kind of hard to reconcile.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to honor both of those. And, in your head, you can start to use logic to plan what's coming next and how you react to this in terms of like, okay, I need to get my finances in order. I need to do all of these things that are very rational, but you need to calm your nervous system and you need to process the emotions. Probably first, kind of lead with the heart. The heart is going to help guide you logically, but you want to kind of heal that inner state because that will help find meaning and clarity for what follows. But listen to both of them. Your heart and your head will guide you and tell you.
How long did these feelings last for you? Like, did it decrease from the first layoff to the fourth layoff? One was 4 months, the next was 2 months. I don't know what the time
Yeah.
horizon was.
That's a great question because that's kind of at the heart of the book. The first layoff, it took me maybe a year and a half. There were so many things that happened around that layoff that made it really, really difficult for me. And it took me a long time. The last layoff I processed in like a couple of weeks. It was no big deal. And what I wanted to do through the book is give people this roadmap so that they're not processing their grief in a year and a half. They're maybe processing it in weeks, like I was able to after I had learned all of the lessons and the coping strategies. So I'm kind of giving people like the cheat code to like getting through this in a way that it doesn't hold you back for a long period of time.
So, when you think about your book and the title of it and kind of your core audience, when do you want people to buy it in their career journey? Because, like, I could
Yeah.
imagine the reading it in preparation versus reading it for post
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
probably two really different things. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that we talk about a lot, and I know I felt personally, was but I actually don't think there's that many good things post layoff, but there sure as hell isn't anything that's like, hey, knock, knock. Remember, you have a value exchange with this company. They are free to terminate you for any reason at any time, regardless of anything. And so I don't think there's even any conversation about, prepare yourself for the inevitabilities of the corporate America.
Right.
So
Right.
when do you think someone should pick this book up?
So if you're in an industry that's really impacted by layoffs, like I was, advertising, marketing,
Tech, I get it.
technology,
Yeah.
like healthcare, media, there's always going to be layoffs, right? So if you think there's a layoff for you coming down the road. It wouldn't help you, or it wouldn't hurt you to read this. It was written with the intent of, if somebody got laid off today, they would buy the book tomorrow. And this would be like their practical roadmap, their guide to getting through what they're going to go through and what's up ahead. So it's kind of meant to be like, in case of emergency, break glass. Like, this is your book. This is your lifeline, your life preserver to keep you from drowning. But, I'm hearing career coaches, transition coaches, outplacement services. There's value for all of those disciplines because there's something in the book that everyone will benefit from. But until you're in the thick of it and you're actually in these emotions, you don't quite know the weight of what a layoff can do to you, like physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, you talk a lot about grief. And in some ways, I've had some conversations with people in this space, and the word grief, it's kind of like the word vision. Like, it can mean a million different things depending on who you're asking. But I feel like the word grief is often reserved for personal things. You lost a dog, you lost a grandparent, somebody moved away, you've lost touch with someone. And that is a very personal emotion. And sometimes when you say the word grief as it relates to your relationship with a company or your job, people are like, that's not really grief. Like, it's just a job, right? So tell us, in your experience, but also I know you've done some research on the topic, like, how does grief show up in a way in which is actually much more analogous to a personal loss than not?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, any traumatic life event where something is being taken, as our human condition and the way that we process those things, we tend to move through this cycle of grief. The original stages of grief were created by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and how she was observing in her medical research terminally ill patients. And they would pass through these typical stages of like denial and anger and bargaining. And then she observed that their loved ones would also go through these similar stages as their relative or friend, whoever was passing. As time has gone on, it's become pretty widely accepted that any traumatic life event, whether it's a divorce, death of a loved one or a friend, or a layoff, you will move through these. Now, you don't necessarily move through all of them at the same time. You don't move through them linearly. Sometimes you might feel some more than others, and maybe some you don't feel at all. But typically, it's the way that we process grief to come out the other side with some type of acceptance and a way of moving on and moving forward and moving through it. So it's kind of the body's natural way of understanding something traumatic.
Yeah. When I'm hearing you say that, it's like, if you have some sort of traumatic thing, it's like the building blocks on which your life has been built and the way in which you understand the world. One of those comes out, that could be a million different things. You need to reassess, like, what does the new ground look like without that one thing there? And you talk a lot about, like, it is just a job, but when you go through this, you are actually creating a new identity.
Mhm.
And that's a really, I mean, that's a, when I hear myself say that, it's like, yeah, of course. But when you're in it, it's much harder to have that level of clarity and
Mhm.
really deeply understand that, ooh, this is actually something really different. And it's not just the job. This is about my identity. So tell us a little bit about, where you land on that spectrum.
Yeah. Here's the thing that you don't realize before you've been laid off, or even kind of right in the early stages, is the person that you were before your layoff is going to be someone much different after your layoff. It's a transformative experience, whether you like it or not. It's a forced pause. And in that forced pause, it creates the space to do some examination, some self-realization, maybe some self-actualization, but gives you the moment to say, is my career in line with my passion and my purpose? Does it bring me joy? is my career path experiencing contraction? Like, for example, AI. Like, AI is affecting a lot of jobs these days. If you stay on the job path that you're on, will you just be getting laid off again in the near future because AI is going to continue to impact that field? So there's all of these questions that it gives you the moment to pause and think about, and then rediscover or recommit to whatever your career path is. And the really great thing about that is then when you do go on your next job interview and they ask you, why do you want this job? You're able to speak from a really, really authentic place and say, I have a real passion for this industry and I really want to continue to do what I've been doing. Or if somebody says, why do you want this job? You can say, well, I've done a lot of introspection. And what I've discovered is I have a real passion for this and I want to pivot into this new thing. Either way, you're speaking from a place of like real like authenticity, and people see that genuineness. So there's value in that journey and that transformative experience, but you're rebuilding identity, purpose, and direction. And that, like, I always say, like, layoffs suck, and I would never say that layoffs are a blessing in disguise. But that moment of, okay, what do I want? Am I on the right path? Is really valuable.
You said the word pivot, which is the word of kind of 2025, generally speaking. But I also think what you were saying about, I don't wish that on anybody either, but life doesn't give you a whole lot of pause moments. I think about COVID sometimes, and I think about it was a disaster for millions of people. I'm not taking away from it, but for my family personally, one of the things about that pause was our kids just happened to be at the perfect age. And we loved being home because for once we were not going to this game and going to that thing and who needs to carpool and who forgot their workbook and all of those things that consume you. And that's part of life and that's beautiful unto itself. But the COVID pause was so beautiful in retrospect. Now, did we love it every day? No, but it was forced upon us and we were really able to take advantage of it in the same way. I look at a lot of folks who have been laid off and they're still in the grieving process. They're still in the pain. They're still in the anger and those pauses or those phases. And they haven't realized that there is a piece of this that is a gift because it does allow you to do the pivot. And so one of the things that you say is moving from victim to architect of your response. And I thought that was a beautiful way to say it because previously, before a layoff, you were beholden to that company, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Like, you were beholden to them. They paid you a check to do whatever it is you were gonna do, and now all of a sudden, you can have a pause to figure out, like, what are the things that I wanna do, and what does light me up, and, if you can harness that moment and be the architect of your response, as you say, I think the outcomes are better. They may not fall on the timeline for which you would like them to, which I think is a struggle,
Uh-huh.
what was your act, kind of like your first act of, "Okay, I'm out of this grief phase and I'm moving into the next phase?"
Yeah, yeah. The thing that really helped me and what I realized in that fourth layoff is that I was very quickly able to move from why did this happen to me to what can I build from here? And
Mhm,
and moving from that backward looking, all of those questions that just have dead ends, like what could I have done differently? Was there an interaction that could have gone differently that would have changed the outcome? Like, why me? Why not somebody else? Just dead end questions that you never get an answer to. And instead of looking backward, then changing the perspective to look forward and say, where do I go from here? What's next for me? And I think that mindset shift turned that layoff from an ending into ultimately what became the blueprint for writing the book, because
mhm,
I decided, okay, what am I going to do from here? I'm going to turn this into a book. But that the answer to that question for a lot of people of what can I build from here can I'm going to reskill, I'm going to upskill, I'm going to transfer my skills into a new area. I'm going to
mhm.
double down and recommit to the career path I'm on. I'm going to pivot, whatever it is. The sooner you're able to stop looking backward and start looking forward is when you kind of reclaim the driver's seat, if you will, of this is something that happened to me, but I'm responsible for what happens next.
Let's talk about the workbook section
Mm,
of your book.
mhm,
As a facilitator of many, many meetings in my life,
mhm.
I love a good workbook. I love a good framework. Which one of the things that you write about has been most helpful to you? And the second part of that question is which one of them has anything surprised you about them? Has one of them been helpful in ways in which you weren't expecting when you hear from people who've read the book?
Yeah, yeah. So for folks that aren't familiar, the book is a very much like a practical guide. And I wanted to give people like exercises they could do at the end of each chapter that they could actively like use the information to move through that stage and move on. So these are like personal things that you can do to the idea of like this life preserver that's going to help you get through this. So I think the one that surprises most people is the emotional debrief.
Mhm,
Writing everything out that you're feeling without any filter will reveal just how much grief and anger might be sitting below the surface still.
mm.
For me, the reconstruction blueprint was most helpful because it helped me turn that emotional clarity into concrete next steps for building, what I would do after this experience and making the experience just a footnote rather than, the whole story.
I want to double click on the emotional debrief.
Hmm.
You know, if you work at a big enterprise company, 9 times out of 10 when you get a layoff, you get some sort of outplacement, coaching, career, blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of people don't take advantage of it. And partially because it's too new, screw that company, like whatever the reason is. And I think that's such a miss because the emotional baggage, like if you you feel these things, period, end of story. Like, maybe you're a 2 on a level of 1 to 10, not a 10, but, like, they're happening. That is
Hmm.
just a human reaction to loss.
Hmm.
But I think when you don't pay attention to the emotional baggage and writing it down and owning those feelings and feeling okay with it, or not even feeling okay with it, just knowing it,
Hmm.
if you don't do that, it's like this little cancer that sits
Yeah,
inside of you,
right.
and it continues to, like, weave its way through your heart and your soul, and I'm a believer that what you put out into the universe is what you receive back, and, like, the world doesn't want that. The
Yeah,
world wants you to have a cleaner soul, having reckoned with
right.
the shit because it's
Right.
shit, like, it's
Right.
not great.
Right. Right.
And it's kind of like therapy,
Yeah.
what I love about the emotional blueprint is, like, you can do that by yourself.
Right. Right.
You don't need to have you don't need to go to therapy if you don't want to, but, like, you have to sit with it for a hot second. It's okay
Yeah.
if you're mad, if you're like, wherever you are in the process, but I think that is so genius to word vomit it out
Right.
because that act unto itself is so cleansing, right?
Yeah. Right. It's a purging process. And
Yeah.
it's giving yourself the permission to feel the feelings and to put words to them, to put a voice to it. And then when you're all done and you've written it all down, you can crumple it up, you can burn it, you can throw it away. And that act in and of itself can help you kind of release some of it. But really giving yourself the time to like sit with it and feel what it is and putting words to it help put it into perspective and frame it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and then once you've kind of written these things down, they don't necessarily own you anymore. You've
Yeah.
given them some freedom.
We used to do an exercise in my former job called orthodoxies, and it was like all the things that are terrible about your business, right? Like, we're hard to do business with, we don't cross and upsell, all those things. And you have to write them all down, like, and be real. Like, sometimes people were like, my boss sucks.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then there was this whole ceremony of crumpling it up and throwing it away and being like,
Yeah,
those are done for today. I think some people think it's hokey. It's not, because now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I feel better. Like, it's
right.
just out.
Yeah.
So your book, Steve, is, I think, primarily written for a individual who has gone through a layoff. But
Hmm.
I wonder if also there aren't some lessons on the flip side of the table when you are the one doing the layoff.
Hmm.
I struggled managing both of those simultaneously. I really optimized on how can I support my team through the layoff, which meant that my own personal journey was significantly delayed. But I wonder, did you think about how this could be helpful or things to remember when and if you are the one who's doing the layoffs?
Yeah, I mean, listen, companies define culture in ways that maybe they don't necessarily think about. So may define culture by we have casual Friday and we'll do a pizza party or whatever. But their culture of a company is really defined by difficult things like how do they do layoffs? How do they announce layoffs? How do they treat the employees that are undergoing severance? What are the severance packages like? How are the employees that are left behind? How are they being treated? And what does that morale look like post layoff? Those are really, really important
Mhm,
cultural milestones and indicators for a company. So if leaders read it as a mirror, and how they're defining their culture of how the loss is delivered to the impacted employees, and I think learning some of empathy and transparency around the communication, right? There's so many negative things that can come from a layoff. I write about in my book that you'll see
mhm.
an increase in maybe heart attack or heart disease, separation or divorce. Maybe people lose their homes. All of these things that this can be the catalyst for really traumatic things that happen post layoff. You might be a little less cavalier in, well, we can do this percentage of layoffs and it'll help drive whatever revenue to the bottom line. You may think about the impact of that from a human equation standpoint just a little bit more.
Mhm.
Impact of layoffs go deep, depression, suicide. Those are some dark things that can follow some employees upon severance. I don't think companies really take into account.
This is not one of the questions we prepared for, but I am thinking about my own experience, and I'm curious where you sit on this spectrum. So, when we laid off my team, the surprise level was really high. Like, people thought they were joining a call, and I was going to announce a new leader, I was going to announce a new number, I was going to announce a new target. Like, that's what they thought. On one side, I think to myself, I did a really good job shielding them from what I absolutely knew was coming down the pike because I was in rooms that they weren't. And I valued that because I think that one of the jobs of a leader is to be the umbrella from the chaos above. And so I think I nailed that
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh,
because nobody knew and
uh-huh.
no one had a clue. And simultaneously, one of the things that has kept me up for the months that have followed is, did I do them a disservice?
Uh,
I didn't need to instoke fear.
uh-huh, uh,
But did I do them a disservice by not preparing them for something that could happen? I mean, it's not as if we were the only people who were laid off, I might add. Like, there had been multiple, and so there was that kind of fear that was always simmering. But did I do the right thing? I don't know. I don't know where I sit on that spectrum.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a difficult level of what's the right amount of communication.
Yeah.
And what do you communicate and when? Companies are tied into stock prices, and if Wall Street gets wind of layoffs, there's all of that there's the implications of. But if I think if you lead with empathy in the moment and you lead with honesty and transparency, and if you can say, listen, I wasn't able to share this earlier, but I'm sharing it now and I'm happy to answer questions, and you make it in the moment really genuine and authentic, I think that's what people are left with. I think you know, if you're a good leader and your team knows that you have their back, they're going to know that you had their back in not telling them earlier because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
That always will show through your larger character and how you present yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that I don't think ever leaves you as a leader either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I will go to my grave thinking about that moment and thinking about I think I handled it pretty well, but you can always quarterback it. You talk really clearly about this idea that humor is really essential, and I was reflecting when I was reading that section about I used to do these things called captain's logs, which were ridiculous. It was, like, meant to be the morning news, but I did it like, rations are running low and we hit, strong seas and blah, blah. And that was my final message to my team was written like a captain's log that, like, the ship had sunk, we were clinging to the rum barrels. And I strongly believe that the humor is part like, you have to have it, but I don't think enough people have that level of humor. Was there a moment where you're like, "Okay, now I can see some of that humor," or how did you bring the idea of humor into what is an incredibly painful moment?
Yeah. Uh, so for me, sarcasm is kind of my love language.
Me
And
too.
yeah, so I'll go sarcastic really quickly. And it's a way of diffusing and taking some of the power away from the situation. So, and I also think sarcasm is kind of the antidote to toxic positivity. So,
Mhm.
humor lets you acknowledge just kind of how absurd and unfair layoffs can be while you're releasing some of that anger. It can be a release, it can be an outlet. So it doesn't deny the pain, it kind of just disarms it.
Mm.
And, in my book, I found a foil for humor through an HR representative that kind of transcends all these experiences. She just keeps showing up and she's like the same person, but, of course, she's not the same person, but she's kind of the same person. And I think that was kind of my way of poking a little fun at HR and the role of HR and all of this. Yeah. So I'm a big believer in sarcasm.
And I mean, to be fair, I also feel for our friends in HR at times like this, because like, these are people that helped your career grow before and, called you about a promotion, and now they have this really awful job too, and, like,
Right.
it's just terrible for everybody
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna start wrapping us down here because I wanna talk about this beautiful line at the end of your book, but if we have a listener who is working in the federal government, in tech, in healthcare, and they have just received word, which, there's probably, like, I don't know, quarter of a million people, half a million people today, and they've just gotten word, and it's their first time. What's the first thing they should do other than buy the book?
Boy, take a minute. Just sit with it. Just allow yourself to accept the feelings. All of it is normal. Take a breath. Find somebody to talk to. Don't be alone.
Mm,
Share what you're going through. Maybe get out, get some fresh air, maybe some exercise, and tell yourself that this too shall pass. This is a temporary setback. It's not a roadblock, it's a detour, and you will come out the other side. But just give yourself a minute, give yourself some compassion, some empathy.
yeah. We someone on my team was like, "You have 2 choices. One is a bottle of wine and the other one is a bubble bath. And whichever one is your poison, that's what you should do." Let's talk about the ending. I actually have it written down here. So you end with this line, quote, "The end is just the beginning, and this time you're the author." So, as speaking to the author of said line,
Mhm.
if someone's listening and they're still in the dark, what's the first sentence they should write in their next chapter?
Yeah. It's going to be okay. You might not feel it yet, but you will. Every hard chapter before this one that you've undergone and you've moved through, you will get through this. And this too shall pass. So every horrible experience has an expiration date. Pain isn't permanent, but the perspective that you gain from this experience will be. We talked earlier about the person that you are before a layoff is much different after a layoff. Moving through this can create some personal growth that you come out maybe stronger with some resilience, maybe a little grit, and maybe a rededication or a refocus on your career. So there are some positive things that you can discover if you open yourself up to the experience. But
Mhm.
just understand that this isn't permanent. This too shall pass.
Yeah. It's so easy sometimes to get caught up at the flow or the energy of the company that you're with and let that carry you. And then all of a sudden the water stops and you're looking around like, what just happened? And how do I put one foot in front of the other? We have someone on the podcast who talks about, he had a very, very, very important, high level, huge job. And one day he didn't have it anymore.
Yeah.
And he had had
Yeah.
it for like 30 something years. And he talks about this. I swung my feet over the side of the bed and I was like, do I put them down? Because what happens after that, I don't know. And I've done this the same way for 30 years. And so, I think you're right in the perspective that you have to let it sit. And sometimes that sitting is for 2 weeks, sometimes it's for like a year. And whatever that time frame is, it is. I think some people want to rush that part of it. And here's the thing that I've experienced it. You can try and rush it as much as you want. Your body will come back to you and be like, yeah, nice try.
Right.
We're going to go back to that.
Yeah.
So it's also, I think it's not like you've passed through this stage of grief and therefore on the other side of the door is glory and whatever the hell else, right? It's like, we're going to slide back into this a little bit. And this is the reason we started the podcast. I don't think we talk about this stuff enough.
Yeah.
And I don't think we love to talk about the successes and we love to prop people up and we love to, be super grateful on LinkedIn and super humbled. And sometimes you're just like, I'm super pissed
Right.
and I feel super wronged. And that's also okay. So
Mhm,
I want to
mhm.
thank you for coming on our podcast. I want to thank you for writing this book. I, like you, wish it wasn't as timely. I wish my podcast wasn't as timely as it turns out to be. But, hey, these are the kinds of things that all of a sudden happen and you don't exactly know why, but are part of your next story. I want to see that book about the ad agency world. I'm sure it has some good stuff in it. And if you haven't already gone to Amazon to buy Steve's book, The Layoff Journey, do yourself a favor, get on there. You can also go to thelayoffjourney.com or
TheSteveJaffe.com.
thestevejaffe.com.
Yeah.
I wonder what
Yeah.
happens at thelayoffjourney.com. Is that
Oh,
taken?
good question. I don't know.
Follow-up conversation.
I should know, huh?
Well, we're going to find out
I guess
probably
I'm
in the
going to
next
buy a
20 minutes.
URL today.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, you're welcome for that free piece of advertising business.
Yeah.
Steve, thanks so much for being with us. So appreciate it. Can't wait to see what happens next in your journey post layoff number 4. Hope you don't have layoff number 5 in your future, but if you do, I know you'll be well equipped for it. So thank you as always to our listeners. I hope that you found this really, really helpful. Make sure you do all the things up top and like and subscribe and share and comment and all the things that help me with the ridiculous algorithms. So Steve, thanks so much again for having us and we will talk to all of you guys soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.